Like all social media platforms right now, YouTube has a misinformation problem. There are anti-vaxxers, flat earthers, election deniers, the gang's all here. Personally, I don't see a lot of it unless I actively seek it out. So, which I do when I'm using an incognito window. So I always thought that the algorithm in general, and maybe the humans at Google, did a pretty good job of diminishing that misinformation. But experts on the topic are a bit more critical compared to my own anecdotal experience. A study published in the British Medical Journal in 2020, for instance, found that over 1/4 of the most viewed YouTube videos on COVID-19 contained misleading information, reaching millions of viewers worldwide. And Kate Starbird, co-founder of University of Washington's Center for an Informed Public, told NPR back in 2021 that YouTube was actually the worst offender when it comes to mis- and disinformation, which, as a longtime viewer of this channel, you already know is false information that is spread possibly unintentionally or intentionally, respectively. Now that Elon has turned Twitter into a MAGA Nazi porn bot haven, I'm not sure if YouTube is still the worst offender, but it does make sense. Twitter and its clones, and even Facebook, are primarily text-based platforms. Written text is way easier to scan for misinformation compared to video, where you've got misinformation that could pop up in the audio, in the visuals, in the captions, tucked away in the description box where none of you bother to look before commenting, "Where are your sources?" Even though I specifically say that every one of my videos links to a full transcript with all the sources in the description box. You know what? I'm actually getting distracted. Let's move on. Anyway, misinformation researchers have long been wrestling with how to even study the proliferation of misinformation on YouTube, not only because of the added complexity of video over text, but also because until Elon ruined Twitter, YouTube was the least transparent social network when it came to using APIs to scrape data that scientists can then analyze. They put some really hard limits, which allowed not a lot of data to come out of YouTube for researchers to even look at. Despite those difficulties, research has been done, and experts knew YouTube has a serious problem. Not only does misinformation flourish here, but then it gets posted to other platforms like Facebook and Shitter and TikTok, which makes it especially important to stop the bullshit here at its source. In 2022, more than 80 fact-checking organizations from more than 40 different countries signed a letter calling out YouTube's dangerous lack of moderation and demanding that they take specific actions to begin to rectify that. They suggest 4 key changes. First, to actually allow independent researchers to more easily study YouTube's data. Second, to include links to rebuttals in videos that have misinformation. Third, to punish spreaders of misinformation by no longer recommending them to viewers. And fourth, to start caring at all about misinformation that is happening in non-English videos. The idea of including Wikipedia-like links to rebuttals in videos was fleshed out in a study presented recently from a group of misinformation researchers from University of Washington and others. They created a browser plugin called Viblio, which allows users to add citations to YouTube videos, which can then appear in the video along with a replaced video timeline that includes timestamps for all of the sources. They did a very small test of the system with a dozen users finding it useful and saying that it helped them take control of their credibility assessments. The researchers compared Viblio to community notes on Shitter, where users can debunk misinformation and have that correction appear alongside the original post. Clearly, YouTube has been considering all of this data and these calls for action because just last week, they announced that they would, in fact, be introducing a form of community notes here on YouTube. They're just starting, and so they've chosen a handful of creators in good standing to try it out. I am not one of them, apparently. They show an example, though, of what it all might look like, in which this disgusting fake news video about 15 extinct animals you should know is righteously debunked with a note explaining that actually the giant tortoise is still alive and kicking, you Russian disinformation agent. When I first heard about all of this, I was of two minds. At first, I thought, Great. I love when platforms launch new initiatives to try to curb misinformation. And then I thought, I still occasionally get demonetized just for talking about stuff like vaccines, even though I'm talking about the actual science, because the system sometimes skews too heavily towards assuming something is misinformation. And I talk about a lot of things that get people really riled up. So is it possible that I am going to get mass fact-checked by conspiracy theorists? Could QAnon nutters game the system to get their fantasies platformed alongside real science? And could notes be used to do what those experts asked YouTube to do, to stop the algorithm from platforming frequent promoters of misinformation? What if a creator like me is targeted, and because of that, I get deplatformed? YouTube hasn't gone into much detail about their new system, but we can get an idea of how it might work and how well it might work by looking at the system that it is clearly based on, Shitter's community notes. Back in 2021, Twitter introduced Birdwatch, a community-driven approach to help address misleading information on the platform. Anyone could apply to be a bird watcher, and users could add new notes with better context for certain tweets, as well as rate existing notes on how helpful they were. I was really optimistic about that initiative when it launched, because a lot of research had shown by then that users of social media are actually pretty good at calling out and stopping misinformation if they are empowered to do so. I also liked that Twitter was being transparent about everything from the jump, allowing researchers and experts to access all of their data and promising to publish the code for any algorithm that was built to help this program do its job. There were some early issues, though. As researchers noted in this study at the end of 2021, they found that users tended to only bother fact-checking posts that they were politically opposed to. Specifically, the authors wrote, users are more likely to write negative evaluations of tweets from counter-partisans and are more likely to rate evaluations from counter-partisans as unhelpful. Our findings provide clear evidence that Birdwatch users preferentially challenge content from those with whom they disagree politically. While not necessarily indicating that Birdwatch is ineffective for identifying misleading content, these results demonstrate the important role that partisanship can play in content evaluation. Platform designers must consider the ramifications of partisanship when implementing crowdsourcing programs. I want to point out just a few things about this study. First, it didn't find that Birdwatch was completely useless, just that new approaches would have to be invented in order to balance things out and control for that partisanship. And second, this important finding was the direct result of Twitter making their data freely available to experts in order to help refine the program. And then Elon Musk took over, and he made everything worse, because that's just what he does. It's all he knows how to do. He's like the scorpion in the scorpion and the frog parable. If instead of stinging the frog and drowning them both, he instead empowers neo-Nazis who might eventually kill him for being an immigrant from Africa. First, Elon renamed Birdwatch Community Notes, which is objectively boring and dumb. It's a way worse name. And then he removed all of that pesky transparency stuff and instead severely limited API access to make research and data collection harder, if not impossible. Finally, he basically just dissolved the rest of the trust and safety team at Twitter, insisting that all moderation could be done via community notes, which, to be clear, is such a worse name than Birdwatch. I cannot stress it enough. By 2023, Shitter employees and community notes users were reporting that things were so bad on the back end that it was possible community notes was actually making misinformation on the platform even worse. Wired talked with contributors who admitted that not only was the community notes system able to be easily gamed, but that they were actively gaming it themselves. In order to combat Russian disinformation, they formed a group of about 25 people who had several different accounts each with access to community notes, and they coordinated their notes and their votes to push their debunks into the average user's feed. Because you see, not every community note ends up on the post that they're trying to contextualize. That would be chaos. So instead, Shitter uses an algorithm to figure out which ones are going to go public. They would probably use humans to help with that, but they fired all of them. So sorry, algorithm, it's your sole responsibility. They are unsurprisingly not forthcoming on how that algorithm works, but we do know that notes need to get a lot of upvotes and labels saying that they're helpful in order to go public. We also know that the algorithm is bridging based, which it just means that the helpful votes need to come from across the political spectrum in order for those votes to matter and for the note to eventually be made public. This, of course, is one way to stop a group like QAnon from note bombing posts. They could say that the 2020 election was stolen from Trump all they want. They can rate the correction as unhelpful all they want, but unless they start a new account and build up a history of liking, Joe Biden, Social Security, normal person things, the algorithm will simply discount their contributions as being politically motivated. But here's the problem. 20 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, you might have been able to get away with arguing that most people can agree on the nature of reality, regardless of whether they're on the political left or the political right. I would have argued with you back then, but now that's a tough argument for you to even make because of the large number of far-right extremists who have been happily living in their own reality, completely unfazed by the reality the rest of us are in. These people have successfully taken over one of the two political parties here in the United States, meaning that while there are still lots of conservatives who acknowledge objective reality, they are no longer in charge and their numbers are dwindling. And they are far less likely to be active fact checkers on platforms like Shitter. They are not motivated in the same way that deluded far-right conspiracy theorists are motivated. And so how does the algorithm determine if a politicized truth is true when only one political side is saying so? Climate change is real, vaccines are safe and effective, abortion is safe and important healthcare, but are you going to find the majority of right-wing community notes users saying so? Probably not. And that's why many misinformation experts suspect that community notes fall apart on important issues, where bullshit ends up going completely unchallenged. None of the notes can actually make it public because the users can't agree on whether a corrective note is helpful. But it actually works really well for non-political topics like celebrities or drop shipping scams or AI. In fact, the director of the Poynter Institute's MediaWise said, these community notes people are very extremely online. So they're actually seeing a lot of the AI stuff on Reddit or other areas. So they're able to pick up the AI generated stuff and frequently do so more quickly than fact checkers. See, the terminally online are still good for something other than making memes I have to look up in order to fully understand. Sometimes I just find a random teenager and ask them to explain it to me. The experts seem to agree that Birdwatch was flawed, but still great as one tool that Twitter could use alongside a more top-down corporate approach to stopping misinformation and the people who spread it. That's how Birdwatch was originally designed. Which brings me back to YouTube's new Community Notes feature. They, too, say they're planning to use a bridging-based algorithm that will require notes to have buy-in from a broad audience across perspectives. But their relatively short blog post announcement doesn't go into how they plan to address the problem of how to balance against an extremely far-right population that has no objective reality. That's a major red flag for me, as is the continued lack of transparency on YouTube's part. The experts have been pointing this out for a long time that it's a problem. Now it's going to be an even worse problem because without independent researchers digging into the data to find problems with the community notes system, like that political bias problem, the system just won't ever be as good as it could be, and any change will likely come much more slowly. All in all, I am still cautiously optimistic about this effort. If YouTube is smart, they've read all the studies on what went wrong with community notes, and they'll implement a better system that can act as a helpful aid to the humans who will continue instituting that top-down moderation. I just hope that in a year or so, YouTube doesn't pull an Elon, putting out like some bullshit internal review saying, hey, this community notes thing is a miraculous debunker of misinformation. So we're just going to have it replace our entire trust and safety team. Please don't do that. Oh God, you're going to do that, aren't you? Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.